Hey guys, in this video, I'm going to briefly go over Fischer projections. In this video, I'm really only going to focus on how to convert to and from Fischer projections, either again, to from line angle or from line angle. There are kind of isometric relationships that we can determine when given Fischer projections, but I feel like that's honestly the easiest when we just convert Fischer to line angle. So that will kind of be covered in a different video, but this is just kind of an introduction to Fischer projections. So I'm going to try to use molview as a tool instead of a molecular modeling kit so that you guys can see, for those that don't have a modeling kit, what is kind of available to you and how to use it. So I may be trying to like switch back and forth, but hopefully it's pretty smooth. So just to kind of, before we go to molview, I just want to kind of introduce really like what is a Fischer projection and how it's similar to Newman, but how it's a little bit different. So, with a Fischer projection, it's kind of another way to view the molecule. So we have kind of the regular line angle representation, and then we have a Newman projection, and we also have these Fischer projections. And so what I like to think about it is like if we have the regular line angle, it's just if the molecule is like basically just sitting in front of us. And then a Newman projection is we're basically looking kind of like down the barrel of one of the bonds. And so that's almost like if we're looking at it from a right or left point of view. And then the Fischer projection is more so we're looking at it from the top and the bottom. Now, with Newman projections, we normally take one perspective, but with Fischer projections, we are looking at the top and the bottom. Because if you can see here, when we have Fischer projections, whatever protrudes to the side is on wedges. So if we have a line angle representation, I'm not going to draw the one that we have right there just to kind of make this go quicker. So if we have these groups right here, they're pointing up. And so the way I like to go through these problems is I kind of draw imaginary people, and then I use their perspectives and kind of put myself in their shoes and kind of answer questions based on that. And it'll make a lot more sense once we actually start doing it. But we can take this person's perspective looking down when we are at these peak carbons. That's just what I call them. There's not really like proper terminology. But when we're at these trough carbons, we need to take this other person's point of view because now the groups are down. And so we always want to take the point of view of the person that's going to have the groups pointing at them. So when we're at red carbons, they point up. And so we need to look at it from above. Whereas with the pink carbons, they're pointing down. So we need to look at them from below, looking up. So that's kind of just like a brief little introduction. And then as a note, these carbons that are kind of where the legs branch off from, these are normally chiral centers. I don't want to say always, but I would say like 80% of the time they are. So that's kind of another thing that you could use to your advantage with these kind of types of problems. So I'm going to pull up molview and I'll be right back. All right, so this is molview. It's a really handy tool that we have in order to kind of look at what a representation of a molecule would be like in 3D. And it is a little bit finicky and it takes some getting used to, but it's definitely a powerful tool, especially for this kind of second unit of the course. So I've just kind of made some fake molecule here, and then we'll just kind of look at what the Newman projection is, basically taking the projection or the perspective of. So this is kind of how we would look at it in line angle. We have this oxygen that's coming at us, fluorine behind us, chlorine behind us, and sulfur coming at us. And just as a note, I feel like a lot of people kind of struggle with realizing that the O and the F are kind of, you could cut through right here with a sigma plane. In this case, you can't because the left and the right aren't the same, but it is kind of a nice tool to see that they kind of overlap one another. But anyway, not to get sidetracked. So if we have a Newman projection, it's basically, if we're looking at this bond right here, we're going to look at it like this. But with Fischer projections, we are looking at when the groups are coming towards us. And so for this carbon, we want to take this point of view. See how there's that kind of carbon backbone That will kind of come up a little bit later. But we want to take this point of view because these groups are coming at us. Now, when we get to this carbon, this trough carbon, we don't want to look at it from this point of view because in this case, these two substituents are going away from us. So we need to change our perspective. And if we call this the head, then we want to kind of view it like this, with the head being here and the body being here. And so again, once we get to problems, it'll hopefully make a little bit more sense, but I wanted to show this kind of visual representation, so it made a little bit more sense visually. I will be right back. All right, so I have a few problems, and this is really, again, just converting Fischer to line angle and line angle to Fischer later on, because I feel like that's kind of the most important skill that you need with Fischer projections. So I'm just gonna kind of do a few examples. Now, the second note that I have actually before we get started is that you want to have the higher priority towards the head. So when you're converting from line angle to Fischer, you want to put the head of the person at the higher priority side. And I believe that there was a document shared that had the kind of relative priority rankings. And if you can't find that, ask your professor or post on Piazza, and we'll be able to kind of show you where that is. But in this case, it is important that you draw them with the higher priority at the head and at the top. Like in this case, we want the higher priority there. But it is important to know that if you kind of have it flipped like this, while that's not necessarily the best answer, it's still correct. You may only get partial credit, but you're still drawing kind of an equal representation. It's just a little bit kind of like the rules are we want the highest priority at the top. So kind of enough of that, but in order to convert to line or Fischer to line angle, what I do is I always draw the carbon backbone first, and then I draw my people, and then I go ahead and evaluate the substituents. And then I just also want to note that with Fischer projections, especially, I've seen a lot of different ways that you can do it. So if this kind of using the people perspective doesn't work out, maybe go on YouTube and try to find how they explain it, because there are, again, multiple different ways that you can think about this. But you just got to work whatever works for you. So in this case, we have a 1, 2, 3, 4 carbon chain. And then on the left, we have a aldehyde. And on the right, we have an oxygen. So, so now we'll go ahead and draw in our people. And again, we want to evaluate, we want to take the person's point of view that have the groups coming at them. So it'll be that carbon where we take the pink and that where we take the red. So now we kind of need to think about things visually. And so if we're at this first red carbon, if we take that person's point of view and they see something while looking down, if they see it on their right, so we're looking down, it's on my right. I don't know if you can see that super well, but it's on my right. When I come back, right is going into the plane. So it's going to be on a dash. And with the pink, if I'm looking up, I see an NH2 on my right. When I return back to the original position, it is on a wedge. And then fluorine is on a dash. So if I'm looking up, it's on my left, it's a dash. If it's on my right, it's a wedge. If I'm looking down, if it's on my right, it's a dash, left, a wedge. Now, don't always use that, because if your higher priority group is on this side, just as kind of like a side note, it'll be reversed. So you don't want to just kind of memorize that. You know, if you're taking the top and it's on the right, then it's on a dash. You don't want to memorize that. You want to be able to visualize it, because that is super duper important. So kind of practice with that, use molview, use a modeling kit if you have one, and don't just memorize. And then this carbon right here is this carbon that has the 2 H's. So we don't really need to worry about that because it's not a chiral center. All right, so not too bad. Again, I struggled with this a lot when I started, and then kind of as just doing practice, it clicked. And from that point on, it just kind of made a lot more sense. So if it's not making sense, I would just say do a bunch of practice. And then if you're having problems, just go ahead and ask. So for this next example, again, we want to draw the carbon backbone. So we have another 4-carbon chain. And then in this case, we have an HO. And so we again want to draw out our people. And then go ahead and evaluate the groups. So this first carbon right here, the red person sees an OH on their right. So again, that will be on a dash. And then we take the pink person's point of view for this carbon, and they see an OH on their right. That is on a wedge because we're looking down, it's on our right, we come back, it's pointing at us. So I just want to note here that, even though both of these groups are on the right in the Fischer, one of them's on a wedge and one of them is on a dash. So you don't want to say, right is always wedge or right is always dash. You need to, again, look at it visually and say, well, from that point of view, right is a dash or right is a wedge, depending on which point of view you're taking. All right, and then I do want to note, it wasn't kind of this question, but similar to with Newman projections, it makes it pretty easy to find planes of symmetry. So in this case, we would have a plane of symmetry right here because this top piece basically is just a mirror of the bottom piece. So we have that mirror plane. And it could be there. There could be examples where it's vertical. I think we have one, but just kind of keep an eye out for that. And then in most cases, I feel like with Fischer projections, most cases, again, not all, but most, they have chiral centers. So if you see that sigma plane, then you can say that it's meso if there are chiral centers. So kind of pulling in a lot of different concepts here. But just moving on to the next one, we have a 1, 2, 3. We have a 3-carbon chain, and then we have that OH. So I don't really think that you would find a lot of examples where the carbon chain is kind of like at the end of OH, because in this case, you really could change this to this, because this carbon right here is not, is not a chiral center because it's attached to 2 hydrogens. So we can basically just kind of get to that Fischer projection. It's really whatever kind of works for you. I'm not sure exactly what you'll be given on the exam, so I just kind of want to expose you to whatever is possible. So let me see. Let me move this. So we have our backbone right there. And on the right, we have an OH, and on the left, we have an OH as well. And then on this carbon, we have 2 hydrogens. So again, Fischer projections are nice because we can kind of see the plane of symmetry. So if we draw right here, that would be our sigma plane. And in this case, it would be the plane of the paper. I will try to draw this on molview so that you guys can see that plane of symmetry, because I know that a lot of times something like this is actually pretty confusing. So I'll be right back. All right, so I've modeled it in molview, and if you're having a little bit of trouble seeing where that sigma plane is, I would just recommend kind of playing with this and seeing that if we rotate like this, that is symmetrical right there with the sigma plane right here. So again, hopefully you guys can start to recognize that, and if not, just kind of use a little bit more practice. So I'm going to switch back to my iPad, so I'll be right back. Okay, I just realized that I was sharing my iPad screen that whole time. So sorry about that, but I have the kind of drawn out molview representation here. So if you're having problems seeing the sigma plane, I would just again advise that you practice in molview, but the sigma plane would be right here. All right, so now I will switch back to my iPad. Sorry about that. All right, so the last example of Fischer two-line angle. So again, we want to have our carbon backbone, which is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we will draw in our people. And then the first carbon, which is right here, actually is going to be pink. So I had that a little bit backwards. So when we take the pink person's point of view, they see an OH on their right. Hopefully by now you guys can start to see that that's going to be a wedge. And then the next one, we take the red person's point of view, and they see a methyl on their right and an OH on their left. And then for the last chiral center, we have, again, pink person's point of view, OH on the right, Cl on the left. So we would have something like that. And this kind of pulls from another video that we should be able to rotate this and have a similar or identical structure. So although it's upside down, kind of like these OHs that are on wedges would still be on wedges, and the chlorines would still be on dashes, and the methyl would still be on a dash. So hopefully you guys can kind of see how that makes sense, because identifying identical structures is kind of super important and will help you kind of later down the road. So that is really all the examples I have from Fischer two-line angle, but oops, sorry. Now we can convert from line angle to Fischer. So this is kind of just obviously in reverse what we would do. So we would draw in the people first. And then I would go ahead and draw in the backbone. So we have a CH3 at the top, CH3 at the bottom, and then we have 3 kind of chiral centers that we want to look at. So when we are kind of at this carbon right here, we want to take the red person's point of view. And in this case, it doesn't really matter which side the head is. I didn't really do a good job of the priorities here, but just kind of take my word for it and start where I am with the head and then kind of work your way down. So at the red carbons, if we see something on or if something's on a wedge, and we're looking down, that means that it was coming at us, and now we're going above it, looking down. That means it's on our left. So instead of saying it's on our right, therefore it's a wedge, we need to say, it's on a wedge, therefore it's on our insert right or left here. And in this case, it was coming at us on a wedge. We look up, or we're up looking down, it's on our left. So that means that there's a hydrogen here. So now when we get to the next carbon, we take the pink person's point of view. We're underneath. We are looking up. We see, or before we kind of change that point of view, let's put our OH going into the plane. And then we go underneath. We're looking up. What was coming into the plane was on our, or is on our left. And that means that there is a hydrogen on the right. And so again, we take the red person's point of view for the next carbon, and we get the same thing. So just as kind of like a little tip, if we see that these 2 peak carbons have, 2 groups on wedges, we should see that they're both on the same side. So in this case, they should both be on the left. If one was on the left and one was on the right, that should be kind of an indication that we have made a mistake. Now, I chose this question because you can now see that we have a sigma plane right here. And hopefully you guys could also see before we even did the Newman project or the Fischer projection that there was a sigma plane there. So in this case, this carbon right here would not be a chiral center. It would have, these 2 substituents be the exact same. So hopefully you guys also could recognize that. And so the next example, now in this case, I did do a better job of the priority. So the aldehyde will have a higher priority. Let's keep it consistent. So we've kind of been drawing all of the heads to the left, but in this case, the head is to the right. And so this will be kind of nice so that you guys can practice the fact that you can't just memorize, when we're looking down, right as a wedge, not in all cases, or right as a dash. So let's get our backbone. And then we have two kind of stereo centers that we want to consider. So with this first carbon going downwards, we take the red person's point of view, or I'm sorry, we take the pink person's point of view because they have the groups coming towards them. So we see that it is going into the plane, and now we're looking up at it, and into the plane is on our right. So there will be a chlorine on the right. Now we take the red person's point of view. It's coming towards us. We look down, it's on our right. So it'll be like this. So hopefully you guys are, kind of recognizing that you can't, again, just can't memorize. So this is the last example, and I feel like this is a really good example because, we don't have that kind of normal configuration that we would see. So there's two ways that you could really go about this problem. So you could rotate kind of this bond right here to kind of get it into the regular kind of looking line angle projection. But I personally just don't really like rotating. I just find that I am prone to a lot of errors when I do that. And so in this case, we can still draw people, but it's kind of going to look like they're doing some yoga or limbo. So in this case, we'll just put the head here. So that is the person for there. And then this is the person for kind of underneath. So we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 carbon chain, or we'll just say that there's 4 that we want to consider. So with the head being there, the first group or the first carbon is going to be this one, and it corresponds to that. And so when we are taking the pink person's point of view, what was going into the page will be on our right. So it'll be NH2, H. And then for the next carbon, in this case, we will not switch the perspective because still at the next carbon right here, the groups are pointing down. And so we're going to take that pink person's point of view. And so what was on a wedge will be on our left. And then now we want to switch the point of view that we take. And so we see an OH kind of on our left and a chlorine on our right. So hopefully that one made a little bit more sense. I have seen kind of a few examples where they give you this, so it's not always going to be kind of in that perfect line angle structure. Again, you could rotate, but I just feel like in this case, it may get a little bit confusing. But you just need to like figure out again what works for you and stick with it. So I know that this is, a super duper challenging thing, especially at the beginning, because it is so conceptual and spatially motivated, I guess. So just kind of practice, and it kind of sounds a little bit weird, but if you're just kind of like walking and you just need to kind of start thinking about how these things look in 3D. So, I'm not saying like, when you're walking, think about these molecules, but, if you can, the more times that you think about it and the more connections that you make, the kind of better off you're going to be. So that kind of, again, goes into just kind of the importance of practice. I feel like I sound like a broken record, but especially in this unit, I found that practice was the most important thing. I would honestly say that this unit is where practice is the most important. So be sure you're doing all the worksheets, workbooks, and the practice exams and following up with any questions that you guys may have. Other than that, that's really all I have. So good luck on your exam, guys.